What's up, YouTube? We're back, and today we are talking about biceps tendinitis, which actually isn't the correct name for it, but you're going to find out about that in a moment because I have with me today Phil White, our resident physical therapist. How are you, Phil?
Very well. Stoked to be back on these live streams and podcasts. It's been a bit of a hiatus, but we're on, and with you, no less.
Yeah, that's right. It's not just Yanni. It's me.
Yep.
It's if we had Yanni, it'd be the dream team, but Yanni's working on something special in the background, so he's not with us today. So today's show, Phil, is all about, I haven't even really given Phil any context for this one episode, except for I said, can we do a show about biceps tendinitis? And that was it. So I've had so many questions lately when I've been doing live streams about slap tears, which is something that I've dealt with personally, and we're starting to get a little bit known for. Everybody's coming to us for slap tears. And on these live streams, people are saying, what do I do about biceps tendinitis? So do you want to maybe first tell us what biceps tendinitis is, or maybe what it actually is? And then, we can go from there.
Yeah, definitely. I think as soon as you said that it was talking about biceps tendinitis, I thought, great, we're going to start our episodes as we so often do with a clarification and a getting precise about words, because it does really matter, because when we think about what the words mean, it's going to dictate how people treat it, and it's really key to get this right from the get-go. So basically, when it comes to biceps tendinitis is the old school word for what is now called tendinopathy. So basically an aggravation of the tendon that causes an inflammatory process and a degenerative process that then, we won't go into all the details on the tendinopathy processes, but basically it causes quite a tricky injury where it's counterintuitive to many people, because unlike a muscle tear where if you give it relative rest and then gradually reintroduce what you were doing before, it often gets a whole lot better. Whereas with a tendinopathy, or what used to be called tendinitis, it's something that you can leave it for a long time and you come back and it's still just as painful, or maybe even worse. And it has this weird thing that, unlike a muscle tear, if you load it more and you keep kind of pushing through, the pain often goes away and then feels fine during the rest of the session, but then it's the next day that you really feel it. So that's a really classic tendinopathy patterns, and we've talked about it heaps of times with the golfer's elbow and the tennis elbow. Very classic for Achilles. I'm sure plenty of people have had that first few steps of the day agony, and then you kind of get on with it. It's okay. But the key thing here to understand about the biceps is it's almost certainly not tendinopathy / tendinitis. It's a completely different pathoanatomical structure issue than a tendinopathy. And so I've got this handy dandy anatomy app thanks to Z Anatomy, a really cool open source platform. So you guys can see that.
Yep, we can see it.
So if you're listening to the podcast, go check out the YouTube. It's you'll get to see the inside workings of the shoulder. So this is just to orient you. We're looking at the right shoulder of this fake person. So we can see here I've taken off the pec major, I've taken off the anterior deltoid so that we can see what's going underneath. And you can see that the biceps here, we've got the two heads of the bicep, and that short head of the bicep comes up and attaches to the front of the shoulder here, but it's that long head that goes through the intertubercular groove. So basically it hooks through this little notch on the humerus itself and goes in and attaches into the joint of the shoulder, so the socket of the shoulder. And for those playing at home with slap tears, it actually attaches into that cerebrum deep in the shoulder there. So what you can see here with this purple bit that's on that intertubercular groove, it's the tendon sheath. And so this is where getting terminology right is so important, because what's going on here is most people who have this pain at the front of the shoulder, and again, like this is just the most classic gym pain that I see for anyone in the shoulder, is that really like nasty sharp pain that you can, if you kind of touch your shoulder and you push your tendon back and forth, it's a really sharp and horrible feeling. And you often get it in things like a bench press or a dip, or reaching behind your back to get something. And it's actually the aggravation of this synovial sheath is what it's called, which is basically, it's a sheath of tissue that's there to protect the tendon from being damaged from rubbing against the bone as we do movements. So it's this really clever thing that the body has, similar to the bursa that you can see next to it, which is again stopping structures from rubbing against bone and becoming damaged over time. So this synovial sheath is protecting the tendon as it frictions against the bone. So that all works really nicely when we have balanced, healthy shoulders. But what can happen is if you have poor structural balance through the shoulder, and you're not maybe like your lifestyle is leading to very internally rotated shoulders that sort of slump forward, and you maybe do lots of kind of mirror muscle exercises like your bench press and your rows, and even if you're doing kind of overhead stuff as well, you're training up your pecs and you're training up your lats, and both big important muscles, really important for structural balance to train the pushing and the pulling muscles. But the thing that both of these muscles have in common is internal rotation of the shoulder. So if you think about modern life being very internally rotated from driving, using your phone, being on the computer all day, whatever it is, playing sports where you're holding a ball or whatever in front of you, and then you add in these big muscles also lead to more internal rotation, then you can get these very out of balance shoulders and weakness and overworking of the muscles whose job it is to keep the ball in the middle of the socket. So if you just listen to the FAI, same issue. It's when we're not keeping the ball in the middle of the socket and we've got these powerful big muscles that aren't being counteracted and stopping the unwanted movement from the smaller muscles, that we start to bump up against the joint structures and the passive structures, so the like the tendons, the bursa, the cartilage, that basically keep the ball in the middle of the socket. So if we go back to our anatomy model here, you can see that basically it's this tendon at the front here is almost acting like a seat belt for the front of the shoulder. So if we were doing a big pushing motion where our pecs are doing a really strong, powerful contraction, if we didn't have the rotator cuff muscles and some of the structure in the back of the shoulder, we'd just get an anterior dislocation of that shoulder, because it would just the muscle would shorten and it would just basically pull that whole bone out. But fortunately, we have our rotator cuff and a posterior deltoid, and we have the labrum, which helps keep the ball in the middle of the socket, all of these structures, and then at the front, the seat belt of your biceps tendon to basically stop that from happening. But you can imagine if those structures are weak, undertrained, overwhelmed by the opposing muscles, then what can happen is you get just a constant frictioning and aggravation of this tendon sheath, this synovial sheath, and then you get what's called tenosynovitis. So that's tendon, and then synovitis being inflammation, itis, of the synovium. So a bit of anatomical terminology there, but hopefully it helps you understand, okay, it's actually an inflammation of this tendon sheath that's the aggravating thing. So the management for that is not going to be tendinopathy management, it's going to be how do we manage tenosynovitis. So does that make sense? There was a lot of technical stuff.
No, that does make sense. Helps. And seeing the imagery, because I've heard you say tenosynovitis many times before, never clicked in my brain as to exactly what it means until now. So that really helped. And so I've been looking
for a good anatomy app to try and make this a bit more visual for people, because I know it's hard to just hear these fancy Latin words and be like, ugh.
Yeah, it really helps. Even for somebody like me who understands the anatomy of the shoulder definitely better than the average person. So what is the treatment? What do you do to treat this?
Yeah, so again, for a basic approach to any injury is going to be looking at how do we bring down the aggravating factors. So anything that is consistently annoying it, can we either modulate that activity? So can we try and get the same, if it's a pushing motion, can we still get a push in there, but doing it in a way that's not aggravating? Or if it's something like, doing dips, can we sub out dips for something entirely different? If it's lifting your kid up and holding them, I've had this from basically holding a toddler who does not want to be in her pram, like having to hold them for a long period of time. Is it just convincing a toddler to sit down and give them snacks? So you've got to think, okay, can we bring down those aggravating factors? Because with the synovial sheath, as I said, it's that inflammation of the synovial sheath, and it's basically becomes thicker and more aggravated, and that with anything inflammation, it's going to bring blood flow, and it's going to bring it's going to swell up a bit, and when it becomes more space occupying, you can imagine easier to aggravate it again and again and again. So we've got to try and bring that down. We've got to try and settle it down by not constantly frictioning it and aggravating it. And then we've got to think, okay, structural balance of the shoulder. Are there any things that you aren't doing? Do you have any weak spots in terms of the strength of those muscles of external rotation, both from the prime mover of external rotation, which is the bigger deltoid, and then the smaller muscles of the posterior cuff. And we're going to strengthen those by doing external rotation in a few different positions. So one position where our deltoid is busy doing abduction, so holding our shoulder up, your deltoid's then using up some of its contractile potential for so it's basically not able to contribute as much to external rotation. So a really good way of getting our rotator cuff to get stronger by kind of bringing the deltoid out of it a bit. And then when your deltoid is not active with abduction, it's by your side, it's then got full contractile potential to do external rotation. So cable, banded pull aparts, cable rotations by your side, dumbbell on your knee, elbow on your knee doing a dumbbell, lying on your side. Any of those variations, really nice for getting the posterior deltoid. So that's the most common thing that people are missing, is working on those external rotation muscles. And again, the reason for wanting that is so that we can first get the balance in the shoulder right, but also those rotator cuff muscles, they literally grab onto the ball and keep it back in the socket so it doesn't shift forward and aggravate that synovial sheath.
Yeah, we get such great results for people that have shoulder pain just by including external rotation patterns into their programming, and I've certainly had really good results from that as well. So it doesn't surprise me.
So when thinking about trying to bring in those specific exercises, if you just bring those in but don't kind of address those other exercises you might be doing that are aggravating it, you can strengthen all you like, but you're still going to just keep pissing it off. So just some practical takeaways for people on how you would change what you're doing in terms of the other sort of prime mover muscles. It's going to be generally neutral grip, where you're able to keep your elbow a bit closer to your side, is often a position that is going to be easier for your rotator cuff to work. Because basically when we're in a more abducted and we're using more pronated grip positions, it's making it harder for your rotator cuff to do its job well. And it's also closing down the space at the top of the shoulder, that subacromial space, which is that basically the top of the ball and socket. And that's partly because the axioscapular muscles, so the muscles that attach your axial skeleton, which is your rib cage and spine, to your scapula, so your shoulder blade, those muscles are really key in rotator cuff function, because the classic, you can't shoot a cannon out of a canoe. If you've got an unstable base, it's much harder for a muscle to do its full contractile potential. So we want to try and make sure that when we're doing those cues of shoulders back and down, chest tall, we're doing that because it's making our rotator cuff able to do its job easier, and it's giving us the best chance to counteract that unwanted movement. So if you're thinking about how do you keep training throughout, with aggravation like this, is think, okay, can I choose options where it's easier for me to maintain that position? Can I choose grips that basically help me maintain that position? And then think, okay, it's usually, again, range of motion that's most aggravating for these injuries. So it's often when you're really going into full protraction in a pressing motion, so you're rolling your shoulder blade forward, or if you're going into full extension and you're kind of getting that kind of counterlever of the ball starts to get shifted forward in the socket by going right far back. So if you can choose exercises which you can control the range by keeping it, not going too far back in extension and then maintaining that retraction, so you're not following through and doing protraction, then you're often able to do the same movement that would have been otherwise aggravating at a decent weight, a decent volume, at a decent speed, but without aggravating it as much.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, that's great. I hope... yeah, go, Phil.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Just hope, I'm trying to, hoping that makes sense to people. If you do want any, if you have any follow-up questions around that, but again, just trying to make it as practical and actionable as possible for you guys.
Yeah, of course. If you do have follow-up questions, put them in when you're watching the replay in the comments, and Phil and I will do an episode answering your questions. And if you want to work with Phil directly online, Phil, where can people find you?
Yeah, on social media, it's Phil White Physio, and for my website, it's philwhite.me.
Awesome.
So yeah, I'd love to connect with you guys. And one thing I would love feedback on is, I have talked fairly technically here, and I've tried to make it simple and understandable and clarify what things mean. But a lot of the recommendation on doing business online is, talk like a third grade level and really dumb things down. But I do get the sense for people who do watch this podcast and listen to it is, you're generally people who are really seeking information, are quite engaged and into their training. So I sort of want to respect that by giving you the most accurate information, but hopefully doing it in a way that's digestible and understandable. And so I'd love feedback if it's just all too much, like it's too confusing, and just make it simpler, or if you enjoy that, that'd be really helpful for me to get a sense of.
Yeah, awesome. Nice one. So make sure you comment, everybody, if you want to see more, and if you want to learn more about injuries and injury management. Phil's incredible at it. Thanks so much for joining us, Phil. It's been great to have you on again, and looking forward to having you back next time.
Always a pleasure. Thanks a lot.